So at this point, we can log people in. We can see their information when they log in. They can click here in the console. We can click Google. It should log them in. I can log in. It'll give me my information, but we have a problem here. If I try to call this.setState in here, and I say, hey, take the user and just pass it in, and I run this again, log them in, they log in, ta-da! What error do I get?
It says you can't read the state of undefined.
Yeah, what that's saying is it says cannot read property set state of undefined. So what it's saying is set state is a property on this on app.js.line 25. And if I look at it, app.js line 25, it's looking for set state on this, and it's saying this is undefined. The reason why this is undefined is because this is a regular function call. When you use a regular function like this, the this becomes this function. Now you can get rid of that by turning this function into an arrow function, and this will actually work. And that's really all you need to do for this to work. Now I actually probably wouldn't set the whole user here, to be honest, just because that's a lot of information that you don't need. What I would do instead is say, let's just take this user and let's make them a new object inside here. Let's just say, hey, this user is going to have some information. What's the information I want? I want a photo URL, which will be equal to user.photo URL. I'm going to have their email, which is user.email, and I'm going to have their display name, which is user.displayname. And if I do this, it should then attach that whole user to this user key in my this.setState. And so that should actually work. And if I save this and I try in this.setState, I should see that it does work. Now, a good way to check that it does work is to go inside the React Dev Tools and see that your state has been updated. So make sure you are calling this.setState here, and you're passing in a user key, where the user key has a photo URL, an email, and display name, like so. If you do all of those things, you should then be able to go to your React app and click Login with Google. It should sign you in. You should see that, cool, that worked. I see no errors. And if I go to my components here and I go to app, I should see that the state has a user object with my display name, my email, and my photo URL. So what if I want to display those? Let's do it. This app component right here has a section down here that I'm just going to make a div. I could probably make it a different component later, or maybe I could even put it in the nav bar, would probably be even better. But just for the sake of this, I'm going to put an h2 in there, or whatever, for a couple of these, for the email and the display name, and then an image. Source equal to, and I'm going to pass those stuff. The problem is that when this starts out, the user state.user is null. And so if I try to put some stuff in here like this.state.user.email or something like that, or display name, it's going to give me an error at first. And so a way to make sure that doesn't happen is to check to make sure that this.state.user is a real thing. And so the way to do that is like this. .photo URL. So right here, we put this inside a JavaScript object, and we say this.state.user and this and sign, the rest of this stuff. Now what this is doing is saying, hey, if this.state.user exists, then render all this. Otherwise, do nothing. And if you do that, you should see no errors. Cool, no errors. Then I log in, and it says, cool, stuff. I click that stuff, and I see my name, my email, and my gigantic image. Cool? and of me teaching. Now here's the problem. Click that little refresh button and what happens? It's all gone. And that's actually not good, because now the user is null. Notice that?
Yeah.
How do we keep the user logged into our app? Every time we refresh our app, the user is going to get logged out again. We have to relog them back in. That's not what we want, is it? I'm going to give you a hint. No. The answer is no. So how do we fix this problem? Well, we have a sign-in thing here, and we want to set the user up. But what we want to do is we want to say, hey, as soon as this component mounts to the screen, we want to check the authentication state of our app. Is the user actually logged in on Firebase? If they are, make sure that they look like they're logged in. If they're not, then figure out what to do. Now the cool thing about it is that Firebase has a way to do this. And so here's what they say. If you go to, and they have this right here, like manage, I think it's manage users or something. They have a way to create a user, get the currently signed in user, and this is actually what we're going to use. They have this thing here that says, get the currently signed in user. The recommended way to get the current user is by setting an observer on the auth object. Now, this is just, all it does is it sits there, an observer, and it just listens. It sits and it listens. And when it finds the user logged in, it runs this part right here. And if the user is not logged in, it runs this part right here. And so what we can do is we can take that, we can go inside our component.didMount, and we can just throw it right there. Now remember that we've already used the auth, and we want to make this an arrow function. And if we do that, that's actually it. So if the user's logged in, do all the user logged in stuff there. Otherwise, do the user not logged in stuff there. So we can just say this.set state and have the user equal to null if they're not logged in. And if they are logged in, this.set state and do the exact same thing we did down here. And just take that and put it right there. Now the reason why we want to do this is because it means that this is going to always set up our listener, so that as soon as this component mounts to the screen, it listens for the user being logged in and out, and it handles that. Which means we don't have to do it down here. So once the user logs in, we're good. That's it. And now, just save this, and you should have a fully functional application. And check it out. It knows I'm logged in, so it just keeps that there. If I refresh, still there. If I refresh again, still there, still logged in. And now your user is permanently logged in until you sign them out. Let's create a sign out button. How do you sign a user out? Well, we signed in by saying auth.signin with popup. Do you want to take a guess what the sign out function is? Okay, cool. It's literally just this. Ready? Auth.signout. That's it. Now right here, if inside this button right next to it, we're just going to create another button and just call this one sign out. And whenever the user clicks this button, we just want to sign them out. On click equal props.signout, take in the props, and then pass that to the nav. And as soon as this happens, we can sign our users in and out of our application, and we have a fully functioning app. So right in here, we could say cool, pass the nav component the sign out button. We'll say, hey, the sign out.
Wait, how do we keep them signed?
Well, the auth listener will keep them signed in, and it will listen for whether or not they're signed in or whether or not they're signed out. So every time the authentication state changes, it'll check to see if a user exists. If the user exists, we set the state to have them signed in. If the user doesn't exist, we log them out.
And what's like the line that you do for sign out user?
So what I did is I went in here and I created a sign out user function
That's sign out. Okay.
and I passed that to the nav. And so the cool thing about this is right here, I can also pass the user is equal to this.state.user to the nav also. So the nav bar knows if the user signed in or out. Now, why would that be useful? Well, if the user's signed in, we don't want to display this login button, do we? What do we want us to display instead? The logout
I
button,
mean, you add
right?
props and nav.
Yeah, so we can just pass this to the nav, and then here, the nav should have nav.props.user and props.signout. And so the cool thing about this is we can say right here, props.user and the sign out button. And then down here, we can say not props.user and the login button. And we do all that. And this is what our nav component looks like now. And check this out. Ready? We sign the user in. Cool. It says sign out. We click sign out. They're signed out and it says log in. We click log in. We can click Google, sign them in, log them in. Now they're logged in. See if they're logged in, and now it says sign out. The problem is we want to probably change from the login page as soon as they're signed in, huh? And so that's really the last thing we need to do. As soon as the user signs in, we want to say, hey, send them to the home page. And they should have the sign out page here too. And that's really how all applications work. Now, if you want to learn how to push them to the home page, again, the React Router documentation has all kinds of cool things you can do. Redirects, for instance, which is the one that we want, which is as soon as they've logged in, redirect them. And so you can do this. Where's that little redirect here? I saw it earlier. Redirect. Oh, yeah. So then you just render a redirect page here. Redirect to path name, whatever. Then we can send them to the right page. And so it's just like a nice, easy way to do the things you need to do. Now, honestly, there's not much more to React than that. If you can sign people in, you can change pages. You can build pretty much any application you can imagine. And so that's what we're going to spend the rest of today doing. You're going to get to pick from a couple different applications to build with, including the Firebase, Firenote, or Fireside chats. Whichever one seems most exciting to you, you should play around with today. We're going to give you the rest of the day to build these or get some practice building full stack applications with React and Firebase. And we want to make sure that everyone has like a full project under their belt, or as much of a project as they can get under their belt by the end of today, because tomorrow is project mode. And so we'll want to make sure that that works well and that everyone's ready for that. Any questions before we wrap it up? I'm going to send all this code out in Slack, so if you don't have it, you can check it out.
What are you passing in to nav? Is it just the sign up?
To nav, I'm passing in the user right here, this.state.user.
Okay, so user
And I'm passing in
is-
the this.signout user function. Cool? You could also have a component here that like only displays if the user signed in, right? So if the user signed in, we can display a profile page. And that component will be the profile component. And in the profile component, we could say, hey, if the user is not signed in here, we could pass the user to it. User equals this.state.user. And then in the profile component, we could say if this.state.user is null, redirect them to the login page, which is what many applications will do. Try to go to the profile page and you're not logged in, they'll just redirect you to the login page. Hey, you need to log in first. Cool? Well, that is it. Congrats.